Mike Rhoades can't be stopped in the transfer portal. And if I'm being honest, this Penn State Nittany Lion basketball team for next season is going to be pretty dangerous, and they're going to be a team that is bound for the NCAA tournament.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of the show, and I'm joined by a special guest again. That is Pat Koerbler on the other side, Black Shoe Diaries of SB Nation. Pat, it's great to see you again. Great to talk to you again. Appreciate the time today.
Yeah, once again, thanks for having me on, Zach. And like you said, exciting times for Penn State basketball. Starting to put together somewhat of a possibly competitive team here.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind now, especially because they still have some building blocks. Now, Pat, we're gonna talk about everything because I don't think Penn State is finished with maybe getting a Kebba Njie back, for example, or I don't think now it's going to be difficult, but someone like Carey Booth is still not as much in the fold, but I still think there's hope, right? I still think there's hope. And then Blue Cain just visited Penn State again not too long ago here in late February in the cycle. So Penn State, and that's a class of 2023 player that has some very interesting potential the way that he's moved up the rivals board for their top 150 players overall. And speaking of rivals, of course, Penn State Rivals, this is your go-to podcast for Penn State Rivals. Visit happyvalleyinsider.com for everything Penn State athletics, and of course, including men's basketball. So, Pat, I think let's now get a better perspective of this roster, because I did an episode just the other day about Puff Johnson and Qudus Wahab coming in. I mean, this Penn State team becomes very versatile. They don't have to rely on small ball like they did last year, where it was everybody was under 6'6", and they had to do everything that was humanly possible to just get out in front of the team, make them bench their big man. But now Penn State can do that because they have guys like Kanye Clary, Ace Baldwin, but then you finally have a big man presence in Wahab. So I guess we'll start with him because it's 6'11", just a big man in the middle. He's not going to step out and shoot it, but finally you have someone that can at least contend with a Zach Edey. You don't have to give that up and allow Edey to score 30 points on a given night. And Hunter Dickinson, he's out of the Big Ten, so who cares about him? But my point is, Penn State doesn't have to be intimidated by big centers anymore, and they can play a little more checkers and not so much chess.
Yeah, I really like the guys that Rhoades is bringing in, because I think it kind of hit the nail on the head there, where it's versatile guys. Zach Hicks is 6'7", 6'8". Mm-hmm. Puff Johnson is 6'7", 6'8". They can be a wing. They can be a forward. And like you said with Wahab, the beauty of him is, yes, despite the fact that these last 2 years, right, he said that Maryland didn't go quite as well as he hoped. And this past year at Georgetown, he wasn't the guy that he was as a sophomore in 2021. But he's 6'11", he's 245 pounds. He can rebound the ball. He's strong. He's a legitimate Big Ten starting center. It's like you said, something that can contend with the Zach Edeys of the world should Zach Edey decide to come back. If Hunter Dickinson stays in the Big Ten, Penn State does have somebody that can play with them. You think about what Penn State would have been if they had, and I liked Kebba a lot. And I thought he really came along as the year went along. But if you put Qudus Wahab on Penn State's team last year, I think that they're probably better than a 10 seed. So for Rhoades to get someone like that in is really good. And like you said, it gives them different ways that they can play. Obviously, you want to be perimeter oriented. You want to be guard oriented. Ace Baldwin is going to have to do a lot of the scoring. We'll see about Noah Thomason, that Niagara kid is officially visiting this weekend. Hopefully he jumps on board. He can do a bit of the scoring too. But having a big man like Wahab who can score in the post just gives you another outlet to do whatever you need to do.
Can Wahab be a double-double machine? Because that's what I've labeled him as. When in his prime, now injuries, and I think system. I think system just has to do with it, because Maryland was just a shell of itself when it came to the coaching changes and Wahab jumping back and forth. And then I come to find out that, again, why Georgetown let Patrick Ewing go was that he just wasn't doing a good job, and it had to relate to the way that he was running the program, not even coaching, just the way that the program was run. And someone like Wahab was probably going to benefit the least from that, because he does need a more team-friendly environment, a system-friendly environment, now that Penn State and Mike Rhoades can give him. So is this a case of, if you give Wahab, and he's healthy, let's assume that he's healthy because he did battle some injuries in the past, that he could average 10 and 10, 12 and 10 even, if he plays 30 minutes a night on average?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you hope that he gets back to his sophomore year form, where he averaged 12 and 8, 13 and 8. Right, obviously double would be perfect, because 10 and 10 looks a little bit better than like 11 and 8. But yeah, if he's getting over 7.5 rebounds, if he's scoring double digits, I think you have to be pretty happy with that. And like you said, I feel like he's been in some difficult situations right at Maryland, the coaching change. Just generally, Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, although I guess, for a big man, I understand why he would go there. And certainly he was helped by Patrick Ewing, but Georgetown obviously struggled a lot. It's not to say that Penn State's going to be, right, like the creme de la creme. This is still going to be a team that is, right, in an ideal world, is barely getting into the NCAA tournament, I think. But you hope that the structure of Mike Rhoades, what he brings and what he is bringing to Penn State himself, can help Wahab as he arrives in Happy Valley too.
We were talking Penn State men's basketball, the additions of Wahab and Puff Johnson. We'll get to Puff Johnson in just a second, and just how the roster continues to shape up. If there is a chance for Kebba Njie, if there's a chance for Carey Booth, and what other players in the transfer portal or high school prospects could be coming to Penn State. Before we move on, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is Built. Are you looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the sugar and calories? Can totally relate. But that's why you need to try the best tasting protein bar out there, and that is Built. You've got to try this. If you're like me, where you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise all the taste, I've got just the thing for you. They are Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing, you will not think that they are good for you. Now, what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably tasty flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy for you. 130 calories, that's all. 4 grams of sugar and 17 grams of protein. Now you don't need to wait around to get a box anymore. For years, we've been telling you, go to Built.com. You can find everything there, which you still can do. You can get your specialty flavors there, but now you can go to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club. That is right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. And thanks so much again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Again, go check out happyvalleyinsider.com, affiliated with Penn State Rivals, your go-to for Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast. Now for Penn State Rivals, your go-to for Penn State athletics. And Pat, where can everyone keep up with your incredible work?
BlackShoeDiaries.com, as always, part of the SB Nation network. And then obviously, you guys can also follow me on Twitter at Koerbler. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it down and right underneath my photo. Koerbler, Poerbler on Twitter.
Yeah. Check out Locked On Nittany Lions and my personal account, Zach_Seyko on Twitter as well. Pat, Puff Johnson comes in, all the potential in the world, because this was once upon a time a top 75 high school prospect. He's the younger brother of Cam Johnson, who just got knocked out of the playoffs. Brooklyn Nets didn't hit.
Yes.
Yes.
That was important to start.
Most importantly, the Philadelphia 76ers are moving on. But Cam Johnson was knocked out by those 76ers. And his game has clicked, obviously, because he's in the NBA. But some people thought that Puff would be on par, if not better, than Cam Johnson. So Puff, somebody who played about 15, 16 minutes for North Carolina a season ago, 4 points a game, couple rebounds. He showed that he's good in transition, right? I see a couple highlights, and he's just really good at running the floor. But then I get the feedback from, there's a guy who writes for Rivals.com, and go check out his work, David Sisk. And, asking David Sisk, he covers Kentucky and North Carolina very closely. And he said, well, Puff's name to fame was he can shoot the three. Well, that's not been the case, because he's been a lifetime under 30% 3-point shooter. So do you think the change of environment, Pat, is going to help with that, since that is apparently his game?
You hope so. And I'm sure that's what Mike Rhoades is betting on. Yeah, I think when you look at Puff Johnson, right, everybody, if you don't follow North Carolina pretty well, you remember him from the national championship game scoring, like, I think he scored like 12 points or something, but also then like spitting up on the court because he got punched or got like elbowed in the stomach.
No.
And I think a lot of people would just think, oh, he's Cam Johnson's brother. He's probably only at North Carolina just because of the Cam. But like you said, that's not the case. He was a big-time recruit. Could have went to Arizona. Could have went to Ohio State. Could have went to Miami. Had other legitimate offers and legitimately went to North Carolina on his own accord. Of course, Cam being his brother helps with the ties. But, yeah, he was a super talented kid. And like you said, was a really, really good shooter in high school. I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but I know at Moon Township, he was shooting over 40%. And even when he went down to Phoenix, once his brother got drafted, he moved to Phoenix with him. He shot over 40% there too. And that just has not translated to the college game. So you hope that happens here. I imagine playing with someone like Ace Baldwin will certainly help. And I do know that North Carolina themselves had, pretty good guards in Caleb Lowe and RJ Davis. But I like to think that Ace Baldwin is probably more of a true point guard in the sense that Love and Davis probably looking for their shot a little bit more. Baldwin will be able to set him up in better areas, and it's just a matter of Puff being able to hit those shots. That's the swing skill, right? If he's able to come in and let's not even say 40%, let's say that he's able to hit 34% from three on 4 or 5 attempts per game, he's going to be a really helpful player because, like you said, he can do a lot of other things. Good in transition, solid athlete, can defend a couple different spots, decent rebounder, can get some steals. So it's really all comes down to that shot. If he wants to make that step into being a certified starter at the Big Ten level, but even if not, he'll be a helpful bench piece and perhaps even somebody who can start and like we said, do a lot of different things for Penn State.
And I think what's going to be the most interesting thing about Penn State this upcoming season is that Penn State not always struggled, but it was just, how many rebounds are they going to get? Are they going to be able to match up with taller players or teams that are just bigger? And Penn State, I think for the most part, did hold its own this past season. But when you look at the lineup now with Wahab and Zach Hicks, as you mentioned, and now including Johnson, 6'8", 6'8", 6'11", and these guys can clean up the glass, like Penn State is going to have, and they're athletic. So it's not going to be, they're going to be slow getting up and down the floor. No, that's not going to be the case. So now you have all these big bodied players on top of the fact that they can run up and down the floor with an Ace Baldwin, with the Kanye Clary. Sure, Kanye Clary and Ace are going to be the fastest guys. They're going to be the first ones to the baseline and back. But it really is pleasing that Penn State is not going to be an afterthought when it comes to rebounding.
Nick Kern is, Nick Kern as well, right? 6'6", but probably the most athletic guy of the group. And yeah, I think, right, it's easy now that Shrewsbury's gone to speak negatively about him. And that's certainly not like my intention because I love Shrews and what he was able to do. Yep. And, you're building a basketball program at Penn State. There's not one specific way to do it. And there's always going to be weaknesses to a team. Shrews obviously wanted to be able to shoot the ball, take care of the ball, and that was really it, right? Size was not the most important thing to him, at least for what he could have built at Penn State in those 2 years. And athleticism was also something that he didn't greatly care about. I think Penn State was a better athletic team or a more athletic team than probably given credit for. Like, I don't think Andrew Funk was I think Andrew Funk was more athletic than given credit for. Seth Lundy was a pretty good athlete. Even Kebba, I don't think athleticism was necessarily his problem. But this is obviously something that Rhoades was emphasizing. Getting guys with length, getting guys with size, getting guys that are good athletes in Nick Kern and Puff Johnson and Ace Baldwin. So yeah, it's gonna be a change, and you just hope that these guys, with the help of Zach Hicks, who certainly can shoot, that Nick Kern can make steps as a shooter, that Puff Johnson can take those steps as a shooter, because if they become, average shooters, all of a sudden you have a pretty good athletic team and also a pretty good offensive team too.
Versatile is the key word for this group because now you have height, you have length, you have athleticism. It fits in the Big Ten, but it also fits with the way that basketball, because the biggest thing that I said about Micah Shrewsbury and why this group made the NCAA tournament, why they were able to win a game as a 10 seed and then be competitive with a number 2 team in Texas. And I think if it hadn't been for Texas, I think Penn State was one of the better teams in that side of the bracket in that regional. But that was because Micah Shrewsbury was mirroring the NBA game, and that's just what fits. But this team has elements of it. Now you have Andrew Funk seemed to be the only, Seth Lundy too. Seth Lundy and Andrew Funk were the only guys that could shoot the three, and you might get a really good night from a Jalen Pickett. But now you have that in Zach Hicks. Now you have that in Ace Baldwin Jr. Now you have that in Puff Johnson, potentially, right? And Puff Johnson's he's struggled. But if he can get back to that clip, being back in Pennsylvania might help here, but that's why I say let's emphasize versatile, because they're not married to, well, we just got a bunch of big guys and they can rebound really well, but they can't shoot. No, they can shoot. They can run. They can play aggressive defense. They can play relaxed defense. They can rebound. They can distribute. They can do so many different things. And that's what I'm most excited about. All right, we'll get to the final segment in just a second. Locked On NFL Draft. Go check it out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, as all the picks are being analyzed. The draft, it's one of the most exciting times of the year. And over on Locked On NFL Draft, you are going to get analysis, fits, everything for all those prospects who now have a home in the NFL. And again, Penn State rivals now making Locked On Nittany Lions your go-to podcast for them. Visit happyvalleyinsider.com for everything Penn State athletics. Pat, in this final segment, it's just kind of assessing what other players could be involved with Penn State, because the roster is not complete. I like the roster that they have a lot. There's still some more spots that they could fill in. Kebba Njie, there's a glimmer of hope for me. I don't want to say that it's all said and done, because I thought he was surefire going to Notre Dame, and then that was it. But then he takes this official visit to UCF. Out of all places, right? It's not like it was another local one close to home. Like maybe let's take an Indiana, for example, because I think Indiana could use another 6'10", 6'11" athletic forward that's more plays closer to the basket. He's not your, Carey Booth is a completely different player than Kebba Njie, even though they are the same height, similar build. But it would have made sense if he had gone somewhere to Indiana, Ohio. I'm like, okay, so he's checking out his home. But now UCF gets into the fold. Does that mean that Penn State, Notre Dame, UCF, and wherever else he visits kind of are all equal players in this case for the Kebba Njie sweepstakes? And do you see a home for Kebba Njie, even though they have gotten other tall players out of the portal?
Potentially, right? I'm kind of in the camp that the longer it went after the Notre Dame visit, the better it was for Penn State. Now, What I didn't think was going to happen was that he was going to take more visits, and I, like you said, did not have UCF on my bingo card whatsoever. I'm guessing there must be some sort of connection with Kebba and UCF, because I can't see. Granted, they are going to the Big 12, right? Yeah, UCF is going to the Big 12 now, so it's not like it's still going to be a power conference, but you wouldn't look at UCF and think basketball school. So I have a tough time seeing UCF really being a player in that. So, yeah, the longer it goes that he's not at Notre Dame, I think the better for Penn State in some sense. I'm still pretty skeptical personally, just because, during his recruitment and during this year, it seems like he was super tied with Micah Shrewsbury. So I kind of do still expect him. I think that's still the expectation that he ends up there. But certainly it's not a bad sign that he is taking visits now and seems open to places beyond Notre Dame. Once again, I'm not necessarily rooting against Micah Shrewsbury at all. I like Micah a lot, and I have no problem with what he did. But I also would find it pretty funny if Kebba does not go to Notre Dame. So I will just put that out there. But we'll see what happens with Evan Mahaffey too. He seems to be in a waiting pattern as well, sort of taking visits, having schools visit him. I think Ohio State and Dayton are the two main ones. So we'll see what happens there too. I will say though that Puff Johnson and Zach Hicks, and specifically Puff, kind of mirror what Evan Mahaffey would have been doing. I think Penn State would gladly welcome him back, right? And you can always find a place for 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" forwards. But Mike Rhoades is moving forward, trying to build this team out, and you can't just simply wait for Kebba, which is why you get Wahab, and you can't just wait for Mahaffey. And they have so many spots anyway. You can have 13 scholarship players. So building out that roster is going to be important, whether Mahaffey and Kebba came back or not. So we'll see what happens there. The only other one person I do want to throw out just for fun is that I saw that Penn's Jordan Dingle, yes, his last name is Dingle, entered the portal this morning. I have no inside sources on this. I'm just trying to will it to happen. He averaged 23.4 points per game. He's a shooting guard, a perfect fit next to Ace Baldwin. So Jordan, if you are listening to the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast, come to Penn State. Let's go. He's from Blair Academy, where Jason or Odafe Owe went, and the Owe's in general. Caden Wallace went there as well. I think Caden Wallace went there. No, he might have went somewhere else. Never mind. He did not go to Blair Academy. My point is, I'm kind of rambling here. Point is, Jordan Dingle, come to Penn State. Jersey kid. He's originally from New York. He played at Penn. Come on down to Penn State, play with Ace Baldwin, and that would be a beautiful starting five for Nittany Lions.
And then quickly, more of the high school prospect route, because Penn State currently has 0 commits in the class of 2023. They are safely, we can say, out of the Braden Shrewsbury sweepstakes. I wonder why. Carey Booth had decommitted, and Logan Imes, they all asked out of their national letter of intent, which is fine. Then Penn State had the right to release them. Logan Imes is probably going to go to Notre Dame. And I don't think Penn State, they can do other things without him. But Carey Booth is one of the premier prospects, depending on where you look. 5-star in some cases, top 100 player guaranteed regardless. Carey Booth, and then Blue Cain makes this visit. And Blue Cain is someone who has now jumped into the top 100 according to Rivals. So Carey Booth, Blue Cain, can Penn State salvage something here for the class of 2023 when it comes to high school?
You certainly hope so. And that's something just in general in the transfer portal that I like what Mike Rhoades has done, just not simply taking guys only with 1 year left.
Well, multiple year. Yep.
He's the only guy that is a one and done. But Puff, Zach Hicks, Ace Baldwin, Nick Colonel, 2 years. So obviously you would like to continue to get guys that are going to be in the program for multiple years too, and that can obviously start. You don't just want to simply rely on the transfer portal, can start at the high school rank. So Blue Cain would be, if Blue Cain came to Penn State when Michael Shrewsbury was here, that would have been a huge deal. So they're able to salvage this end of the 2023 recruiting class by getting Blue Cain, who is a top 100 prospect in his own right, was at one point committed to Georgia Tech, has an offer from Virginia. I believe he just visited Virginia too. So if Penn State's going head to head with Virginia for a prospect down the stretch, and it seems like they have a legitimate shot at him. That's really, really good work by Mike Rhoades and thinking what he can do in 2024 and 2025 as he's at Penn State longer and longer and kind of builds his program up. I don't know a ton about Blue Cain, probably any more than anybody else. Yeah, I know he's a combo guard, can play a little point, can play off the ball too. Good shooter, just good all around scorer. I know he has a nice mid-range game, specifically off the pull up. So just if you can get a top 100 kid at Penn State, you take that any chance you get. So we'll see what happens, Blue Cain, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the 2023 class, because obviously Mike Rhoades would like to have some freshmen coming into the program this coming season.
Absolutely. And Pat, always great to get your perspective, your analysis of the total roster construction. I'm sure we'll talk to you very soon because Penn State still does have some spots to fill out for the 2023-24 season and beyond. Pat, of course, you do great work at blackshoediaries.com. Just let everyone know again where they can keep up with your work personally.
Yeah, that's blackshoediaries.com. Lots of football content, lots of basketball content as well, of course. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Koerbler, Poerbler. All
right, Pat, thanks again for your time as always. I love talking to you, really, I do.
Appreciate it, and I love coming on. So, yeah, definitely appreciate everything that you do, and thanks for having me on.